The fighting is resumed, so what's Trump doing to try to stop it? And what's Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's attitude? Can you guess? Also, there's the California election. This fiasco has become a national talking point. Can you believe a primary election actually took 39 days to count the results? So, over the weekend, this totally blew up on X. Everyone was talking about it online. A lot of people were really upset. This California election could bring a whole series of changes to the US, but what exactly will those be? That's also one of the topics I'm bringing you today. In addition, the seemingly dead Save America Act might have a glimmer of hope. So, what's going on with that? All right, welcome to Good Morning America, brought to you by Fang Wei. Good morning to all our viewers on YouTube, and a warm hello to our listeners on Sound of Hope and FM 96.1 in Silicon Valley. Okay, let's get straight to the point. First, let's talk about the situation in the Middle East, which took a sharp turn for the worse on Monday. So, what's going on between Israel and Iran? Since the ceasefire in April, this is the first time they've exchanged fire again, though not directly. Iran launched what they called three waves of attacks against Israel, mainly using ballistic missiles aimed at two Israeli military bases. At least that's according to the Iranian side. On the Israeli side, they say that Iran's missiles were aimed at central and southern Israel, including Dimona, which is home to Israel's main nuclear research center. So, where did this whole attack originate from? Let me give everyone a quick recap. So, Iran claims that Israel struck Hezbollah targets in Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, because Hezbollah, well, according to Israel, Hezbollah has been firing into northern Israel for some time now. So basically, Israel retaliated against Hezbollah. Let's call it revenge against Hezbollah. Hezbollah was hiding out in the capital of Lebanon, so Israel struck important Hezbollah sites in Beirut. I wouldn't exactly call them fortresses, but they were significant locations. Of course, Hezbollah can't really win against Israel militarily, so they turned to their backer, Iran, for help. So, what did Iran do? Iran wanted President Trump to tell Israel to stop, but when that didn't work, Iran directly opened fire on Israel. To put it simply, it's like the old strategy of besieging Wei to rescue Zhao. They did it to save Hezbollah. So, what happened next? After this round of attacks, President Trump publicly stated that he would urge Netanyahu not to retaliate. But did Israel listen? No, Israel didn't listen. Israel still struck Iran. The Israeli Air Force launched several powerful attacks. First, they hit military targets in western and central Iran. Second, they struck the oil complex in Mahashar in southwestern Iran. Basically, it was this petrochemical plant. The Israeli ambassador to the United States explained that Israel launched these strikes in response to Iran firing over 100 ballistic missiles at Israel. Each of these ballistic missiles could level an entire neighborhood and kill hundreds of people. He said that no self respecting country in the world would tolerate or endure such an attack, and Israel won't either. At the same time, the Houthi forces based in Yemen also claimed that they launched a ballistic missile from Yemen toward central Israel. Yemen is really cunning, you know? The Houthi forces aren't Yemen itself. So at critical moments, they make a show of doing something, then immediately pull back. Basically, they're just reporting back to their boss, Iran. Now, as the new round of clashes between Israel and Iran escalates, US President Trump is still trying to push forward an agreement with Iran. On Sunday, Trump had a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. During the call, he made it clear to Netanyahu to avoid further strikes against Iran, because the negotiations were already close to making progress. So, what happened? Earlier, in an interview with the Financial Times, Trump said, Iran's attack on Israel didn't really hit anywhere because everything was intercepted, so Israel would be better off not retaliating. He also emphasized that the related negotiations are led by the US. He said, I'm the one who calls the shots. Everything is up to me. Netanyahu doesn't get to decide. So, what about Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu? On domestic media, on television, his spokesperson said that Israeli leaders must have the ability to say no when necessary, even if it's to the President of the United States. Then he added, there are still surprises to come. They won't allow Iranian forces to be stationed in Lebanon, which basically means they won't allow Hezbollah to keep growing in Lebanon and threatening Israel. So, in short, Netanyahu didn't listen to Trump. That's the situation right now. So, what's the latest update? Israel's so called Joint Military Command, called something like Ananbia, announced on Monday that after their painful response, they have stopped operations against Israel. In other words, Iran has pulled back its troops. That's basically the situation, right? So, what about Trump? He just tweeted that both sides, that is, Israel and Iran, want an immediate ceasefire. Final peace negotiations are underway with the condition that ignorance or foolishness doesn't get in the way. The blockade will continue to be maintained and fully enforced until a final agreement is reached. Things are expected to move quickly. Then he said and followed up with another tweet saying that Israel and Iran must stop shooting at each other, stop targeting each other. Let me make a joke here. I've talked about this situation with everyone many times before. I nag about it every day. My joke is if I ever had the chance to give President Trump some advice, I'd say Israel's role is perfect for Trump, right? Trump could say, go ahead and fight. You play the good cop, I'll play the bad cop. You fight, I'll negotiate. If negotiations with Iran don't work out, I'd just say, well, if you don't agree with me, I can't control Israel. If they decide to strike you, they absolutely can. So Iran is also playing both sides right now, right? In my opinion, personally, Iran has two factions. One is the negotiation faction, and the other is the hardliners. The negotiators always use the hardliners as leverage at the table to get more concessions. Actually, Trump should take advantage of Israel as a natural, really great asset. It's not just an act. If Israel really wants to fight, they truly can't be restrained. As we've seen, they're already beyond restraint. But if Trump can't see that Iran's playing both sides, then of course he won't use a two-pronged strategy either. But if he does see it, I believe he'll use it. All right, so when will he realize it? Let's just wait and see, okay? Now, let's talk about the election dispute in California, which has now become what you could call a nationwide battle. I'm putting quotation marks around battle. There's no real fighting, no guns, no smoke of war, okay? Here is the situation. California can't finish counting its election votes. The state election office says final results won't be out until July 10th. Since the primary was June 2nd, it will take 39 days to get the results. That's just the reality in California. But has it always been like this in California? Interestingly, no, it hasn't. In the 2024 presidential election, which was on November 5th, California announced the results the very moment the polls closed. The results were immediately given to Kamala Harris. The polls closed at 8 o'clock, and by 8:02, California had already announced the election results and that Kamala Harris had won. So the contrast here is just huge. The head of the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office of the Department of Justice, Ashley, is currently investigating the election process. Yesterday, she posted a long tweet. Last night, on the show Tian Fong Yeton, no, actually, Feng Xingli I already mentioned this to everyone. I won't go into all the details, just a brief summary. Basically, what she said was that if first-time voters in California don't have a case number, if you don't have a driver's license number, you can use a lot of other documents. That's what the California government is saying. They're telling everyone what the requirements are. You can use a gym membership card, a credit card, a debit card, a prescription label, an insurance card, or even an employee ID issued by your employer. Any of these can be used to register to vote. Just think about it. All these cards I just mentioned, as anyone living in the US knows, have absolutely nothing to do with proving you're a citizen. And most of these cards don't even have a photo on them. Who knows if you say you're John Doe or Jane Smith? You could just claim to be someone else and successfully register. So that's one aspect of the situation in California. Then the prosecutor goes on to say that California is actually blocking the federal government from auditing its voter rolls. Basically, the federal government is saying, hand over the voter rolls, I want to check them. California said, no, our state privacy laws don't allow that. Okay, so does that mean things are stuck? Not at all. Because what California is doing here, there's no way it'll hold up. There's a 100% chance they'll lose in court. In fact, they're already being sued, and the key point is that they're guaranteed to lose this lawsuit in the end. Why? Because according to Article 6 of the federal Constitution, it clearly states that state law is subordinate to federal law. It's called the Supremacy Clause. Federal law is the highest law. So even if you say investigations aren't allowed and your state passes 100 different laws, just one federal law can override them and say investigations are allowed because federal law trumps state law. That's the situation right now. Of course, Trump is extremely angry about this. He tweeted asking if anyone is paying attention to the corruption happening in California's ongoing election. So, two outstanding Republican candidates, California gubernatorial candidate Steve Hilton and Los Angeles mayoral candidate Spencer Pratt, are being cheated. America itself is also facing cheating. If the Democrats are able to accomplish their mission, then huge trouble and panic will follow. Please pay close attention to this election. So let me start by saying that last night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, Decision Desk HQ, which I'll explain in a moment, announced that in the Los Angeles mayoral primary in California, the third place candidate, Roman, advanced to second place, bumping Spencer Pratt out. So, what is Decision Desk HQ? It's abbreviated as DDHQ, and it's an American organization that provides real time election results reporting. And this company basically predicts election outcomes and who will win. It's a data company like that. Simply put, in the vote counting industry, it's one of the organizations responsible for counting votes, reporting results, and announcing the winners. It's actually the data source used by dozens of newsrooms and media organizations in the US. So, how reliable is it? Well, let me put it this way: its reliability is hard to say for sure, but what we can say is that it really is the election information source used by dozens of mainstream American media outlets. Okay, so of course, when this was announced yesterday at 11 o'clock, it caused quite a stir. But I think those of you who have been watching my show for a while already know that I've actually said before that, well, Platt would fall behind. He wouldn't be able to hold on to second place. And as for Hilton, he might be able to hold on. I said might, because this is a bit of a prediction on my part. Predictions can also be inaccurate. I'm just sharing my prediction, because if he drops to third place, the shock would be too great, so that might not happen. That's why I didn't predict that Hilton would fall to third place. But as for Pride dropping to third, I've said for a long time that it would happen. It really would. And sure enough, it happened last night at 11 o'clock. He went from leading to being eliminated. So in this situation, he was ahead by 10 percentage points, right? Then it became 6, then 3, then 1, and now he's actually been overtaken. So there's this latest thing called the 454 to 5 ballot drop, which is a batch of mail in ballots being delivered, basically a huge sack of ballots. A whole sack of ballots. This batch of ballots gets dumped in and counted again. Now, in this batch, everyone noticed a really bizarre spike in the middle. If you go back to that chart from earlier, there's a peak that shoots up. That spike is for Raymond, the Los Angeles City Council member, who's not really well known, but in this batch, he suddenly surged way up. What's going on here? Does that make any sense? In this batch of ballots, Raymond got 40% of the votes, Bass got 33%, and Bright only got 18%. So this is exactly what Trump was talking about. Right in front of us, they're stealing the votes. That's how Trump sees it. So this is what's happening right now. Then at 8:30 p.m. Pacific time, which is 11:30 p.m. Eastern, half an hour later, then there's the Arizona congressman. His name is Abe. Himada posted a tweet and used some strong words. What did he say? He said it very clearly, that California is no longer able to hold free and fair elections in accordance with the principle guaranteed by our Constitution that each state should have a Republican form of government. So, what does it mean to federalize the election? He used some pretty formal language, so let me translate it for you. The US Constitution stipulates this: state governments, just like the federal government, must also be Republican in form. So, what does Republican mean? It means that the people elect representatives to govern, and each representative serves a term, meaning they are regularly reelected. That's what a republic is. So, what he means is, when it comes to the matter of people electing their representatives, if this isn't stable, it's unconstitutional. To ensure a Republican government, the federal government can intervene. A federalized election means a federal takeover. California wouldn't be allowed to run the election anymore. The federal government would take over. So at 5:26 in the morning, President Trump tweeted saying, "Isn't this basically what happened to Prather? He was pushed out of the top two." He said, "This is something that should never happen." Election fraud. Okay, so but Trump was actually quoting that congressman I just mentioned, Congressman Hamadeh, in his tweet. What he meant was he agrees with what Hamadeh said about taking over the election. Of course, there's still a gap between agreeing with something and actually taking action, but what I want to tell everyone is this. When things have reached this point, when Congressman Hamadeh talks about taking over the election and Trump retweets him, even adding a comment, election fraud. This means that the controversy over the California election has reached a boiling point and it's become a national issue. Okay, you could say that after the primaries ended, the real battle between both sides over the primaries has only just begun. So, to put it bluntly, federalizing the election basically means using force. It means sending in the military to take over the election. From now until October, will Trump make a move? How should this be handled? This is what everyone is watching. Will Trump do something? He definitely will. The question is how he'll do it. All right, let me talk about a few things. I think there are a few consequences coming up. First, since such a big shock has happened, I think it's highly likely that Hilton won't be taken out. Otherwise, it would just be adding fuel to the fire. That's the first point. The second is that public opinion is now surging. This is reflected in two ways. One is the demand for the Department of Justice to thoroughly investigate California's election process. The calls to ensure the integrity of this election will definitely be very loud. And even the calls for federalization will resurface, not just from the congressman we mentioned earlier. At the same time, within the Republican Party, the drive, or you could call it the pressure, to push for the Saving America Act to thoroughly resolve these issues will definitely increase significantly. The motivation comes from senators like Mike Lee, while the pressure is on senators like John Thune. The leader of the House members will feel a lot more pressure. Another thing is that the Supreme Court is now much more likely to step in, and it just so happens that the Supreme Court currently has a relevant case on hand, which is expected to be decided this week. So, what is this case about? I'll tell you all about it in a moment. All right. So, okay, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the Save America Act. The Save America Act still has a sliver of hope left. This is honestly a really bizarre situation, so let me explain it to you all. For people who care about the Save America Act, the California election is actually seen as a good thing. For them, it's a real life example. In other words, if elections aren't strictly regulated, if you don't check IDs, if you don't verify identification, then it can turn into a huge controversy like this. And this situation in California basically gives the Save America Act a clear justification for being passed. But no matter what, there's still the question of how it will actually get through, right? Some media outlets have interviewed Republican senators about this on the Republican side. As for the main driving force behind the push for the Save America Act, that's Utah Senator Mike Lee. When asked what to do, he said, "This is what I heard yesterday, and I thought it was pretty good." He said, "Let Vice President J.D. Vance come to the Senate and preside over the proceedings." So there's hope it could pass. What does that mean? Let me explain it to everyone. The logic goes like this. This has to do with some of the rules of how Congress operates in the US. On my show, I usually not only talk about the news, but I also try to explain the American political system, as well as some knowledge about the country's values and other related topics. So let me explain this logic to everyone. First of all, you definitely need 50 votes, right? The Republicans need to have 50 votes to pass the Save America Act. If they have 50 votes, since you need 51 votes to pass, well, the vice president is here, and she can always cast a tie-breaking vote. So, in theory, you just need 50 votes. Getting those 50 votes is the first prerequisite. Now, here's the situation. There are currently 4 people who have serious doubts about this. One is Tom Tillis from North Carolina, another is Mitch McConnell from Kentucky, then there's someone from Alaska, and Susan Collins from Maine. If all of them are unwilling, then it's not going to happen. There would only be 49 votes left. Right now, Susan Collins is being approached by Mike Lee. After a lot of persuasion, they managed to win her over a bit. So Collins said, "If you tone down this Save America thing a little, I'll be willing to support it." Mike Lee replied, "All right then, for the bigger picture, I'll consider it." So we agreed that when you register to vote, you have to show proof that you're a citizen, but when you actually vote, you don't need to show it. Susan Collins said, "Well, if that's the case, then I'm on board. That way we'll only lose 3 votes, right?" Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is now you have 50 votes plus the vice president makes it 51. But if the other side uses a filibuster, it still won't work, right? What if you still can't break through? What do you do then? And the Republicans really can't get 51 votes to abolish the filibuster itself. So there's only one way left. That way is for the Senate Majority Party to make up its mind and do nothing else for the next 3 months. Just let the other side actually do a filibuster and exhaust all their speaking time, because each person can speak twice and each time they can talk for hours. Once they've used up all their speaking time, we'll carry the filibuster through to the end. Then we vote. Since we have 51 votes, it'll pass. So, why hasn't this been done yet? There are 2 reasons. First, it's extremely exhausting. You have to be really determined. First, you can't withdraw the bill or switch topics. As long as it hasn't passed, you only work on this one bill, nothing else. All the other senators' bills have to be set aside and wait. So the majority leader has to have this kind of determination. That's the first thing. The second is once the session starts, you can't adjourn. No matter how many days the meeting goes on, it's all considered the same legislative day. Because if you adjourn and start a new day, everything has to start over. The speaking rights, those two rounds, all have to be counted again. This way, you force the minority party to use up all their opportunities to speak by maintaining that first legislative day. The third point is that you have to make sure the Republican senators are always present, because if you think, well, it's going to take months to get a result anyway, so let's just leave, that's not going to work. If you just wait for them to finish talking before you act, that won't work. As soon as there are only a few people left and the numbers are in your favor, you can immediately call for a vote and shut it down. So a significant majority of the Republicans have to stay on site. Almost everyone has to stay there for months. In Congress, when it's time to vote, there's no rule that says members of Congress have to vote. There aren't even rules for attending congressional hearings. For a lot of hearings, it's just the aides who show up. Many members of Congress are pretty old, and they can't just sit there the whole time, so they'll go back to their offices to rest or take care of other things, only coming in to cast their vote when it really matters, and then they leave. Sometimes, if they're busy or have something going on at home, they just don't vote at all. They're simply absent. So once it gets to something like the Safe America Act, that's when things get really intense, like a close quarters brawl. If you want to push it through, you can't have any of your people missing. If even one person is absent, the other side could suddenly call for a vote right then and there. You could actually end up losing instead. So, yeah, that's why the ruling party, the majority party, faces extremely high demands. Fourth, about the chairperson, I'm talking about the Senate chairperson here. The Senate chairperson is not the same as the Senate majority leader. These are two different roles. So, what about the Senate chairperson? They have to strictly enforce, what's it called again? Rule 2116? No, that's not right. Anyway, I've forgotten the exact Latin term, but basically they have to enforce this rule, which means not allowing the same senator to repeatedly use different forms to speak. To make unlimited speeches, they can't just disguise their speeches in different forms. You have to stop them. As the chair of the meeting, you have to be extremely strict and tough about this. Fifth, you have to be willing to withstand media pressure. If you do this, the media will definitely say you're destroying Senate traditions, forcefully pushing through election bills, suppressing the minority party, or ruining the Senate, and so on. You have to be able to handle that. Yeah, that's basically the situation. In short, that's what's needed. So when it really comes to a filibuster, it's not just pressure on the minority party, they have to keep talking and talking, but it's also huge pressure on the majority party. They can't back down. They have to keep watching the floor the whole time. Okay, so the leader in charge really needs to have nerves of steel. Plus, they can't waver at all. So you see, the American parliamentary system is really interesting. What other country operates like this? But that's just how it is in the US. So, well, nobody really wants to do this job. In a battle among the three branches of the military, the general always has to be the toughest one, right? But Wen doesn't want to do this job, which is why he's been dragging it out until now. He just doesn't want to do it. So what does McCleary mean by this? McCleary is saying, all right, since it's all about leadership, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. You don't have to do this dirty work. I'll go convince JD, the foreign investor, to take it on. Let the vice president handle it. You just need to cooperate. All you have to do is stick to one thing. Don't change the topic. Everyone, pay attention. Don't change the topic. What topic? The topics discussed in the Senate aren't decided by the meeting host, but by the majority party leader. So Wen insists on not changing the topic. The person who hosts every day, saying harsh things and keeping everyone in line, replace that person with JD Vance. Okay, so JDY will preside over the entire process, making sure the minority party uses up all their speaking opportunities and then the vote passes. That's exactly how it is. But there are two big conditions here. First, JD Vance has to be willing to do it, and McConnell is trying to persuade him right now. Second, he really has to be willing to stick it out for 2 or 3 months, maybe even 3 or 4 months, because this has never been done before. In American history, the Senate has never done anything like this. You never know what might happen halfway through. So it takes a huge amount of determination, and you have to find ways to overcome every obstacle to get it done. Isn't that interesting? As you all know, this is a way to avoid fighting, so instead you use the rules, but that makes it incredibly tough. All right, so there are two more things left. Among the three senators who voted against it, one is McConnell, one is Tillis, and then there's Murkowski and also Susan Collins. The other three are still understandable. Why is that? Because McConnell and Tillis really don't like Trump at all. So whatever Trump wants to do, they just won't do it. Anyway, I'm not running for re election, so I don't care. And I'm not afraid of you either. Now, as for Susan Collins, she's from Maine, right? She's a Republican from a blue state. What does that mean? It means she can't be too pro Trump. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to keep her seat. But the strangest one here is Murkowski. So, who is Murkowski? She's a Republican senator from Alaska, which is clearly a Republican state. Why would she oppose the American Rescue Plan? You have to know, 80% of voters support the American Rescue Plan. Of course, if you ask me why she's against it, I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah, how could you, as a Republican, be against it? Anyway, the thing is, her opposition obviously upset the Republicans, right? So, how has she managed to keep getting reelected as a senator from Alaska? The reason behind this is Alaska's election system, which is called ranked choice voting. California uses this too. Ranked choice voting, not everywhere uses it, but some places do. So, what is ranked choice voting? In Chinese, it's called the ranking selection voting system. Basically, you only vote once. After counting the votes, if there's a winner, meaning someone gets more than 50% of the votes, then that's it, the election is over. But if there's no winner, if nobody gets over 50%, then what do? You don't hold another election. Instead, you take out the ballots again and look at who was ranked second. The votes for the lowest ranked candidate get redistributed to whoever those voters picked as their second choice, and you count the votes again. Okay, and then you keep repeating this process, eliminating the next lowest candidate and redistributing their votes until in the end, you'll always be able to count up and find a single winner. There's no need for another election. So, what's the advantage of this system? The benefit is that if you can't pick a winner in the first round, you don't have to hold a new election, which would cost money and time. This system guarantees you'll get a result. But another feature of this system is that it really favors moderate candidates.